Our second reading is from page 12 of your Bibles, and is Genesis, the first part of Genesis chapter 11. And in my opinion, it's probably one of the most significant passages in the whole of the Old Testament. I'm sure that our preaching friends could get many, many sermons just from this one alone, especially verse 6. Genesis 11. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar or Babylonia and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used bricks instead of stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people, speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, or confusion, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. This is the word of the Lord.
And thanks, Neil, for reading for us. My name's Tim Mildenhall. I'm the senior minister here, and it's great to be able to open Genesis for our third last time in our series at the moment. We're going to be looking at Genesis 12 next week and then dipping in a little bit further through after that. But it would help you to have Genesis 11 open in front of you on page 12. If you don't have a copy of what I'm saying and you'd like to have a copy, there are a few more spares down the front down here. Just pop your hand up or come and grab one. That'd be great. Today, the Tower of Babel. I think I should take this off. I'll get too hot, I think. I think Neil's right. Very, very significant part of the scriptures. It's really the prehistory section. Chapter 12 takes us more into our kind of world, the historical kind of approach in the Old Testament. But I need to say, I think because we're in Sydney, this is not about houses and high-rises and stuff like that, right? There's not actually a call to get together to, protest the building of that high-rise around the corner up there, okay? You do know about that, don't you? There's quite a hullabaloo at the moment about the 7 or 8 story building that is planned. This is not about that. Okay, now we've had our real estate conversation, we can get on with the text. It's not even anti-technology, I think. It's about how deeply engaged God is with our culture, how we do things. And I reckon it explains why Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is so important, why it resonates with us and why it will never work. It explains why we need the United Nations and peacekeepers, and they will never work. It explains why we use language the way we do, and I think why so many people misunderstand me. That's not just a preacher's problem, I'm sure, but goodness me, it has been difficult over the years. It gets behind our desire for unity and our failure to reach it. It explains something of what lies behind our fascination with and even our addiction to technology. And it shows that those who want to, follow Jesus in this world, they're going to be the true rebels. Of course, the Tower of Babel is like another Garden of Eden. But now, instead of just one couple, we've got all of humanity, united in language, in purpose, in planning and technology and effort. And what they achieve is a monumental, arrogant rebellion against God with catastrophic results. And those results are with us still. And even the structure of the passage shows us. I don't know if you noticed as we kind of read through it, the first 4 verses are about humanity's plans. And then from verse 5, there's a hinge, and we've got God's plans. And right at the centre sits this little phrase, verse 5, the Lord came down to see the city. It's a huge affront, I think, to the pride of the people, because they've been building the tallest building the world's ever seen. But God comes down. So let's look at these 2 halves together, and we'll spend most of our time in the first half and then look at how the second half helps us understand the whole thing. So firstly, the plans of a united humanity. Verse 1 picks up after the flood, and the emphasis is really on the complete unity. There's one language, everyone's speaking the same words, everyone's understanding each other. Not a trivial difference to where we're at in the world at the moment. It's just like God gave in the beginning. But then a shadow moves across the page and they migrate east. Now remember, when the people came out of the garden, Adam and Eve, they were sent east, and the Lord God sent an angel with a sword at the entrance behind them, the entrance of the garden. And here humanity goes further and further. It's like they're going further and further away from the Lord and from the garden into the land of Shinar, and that's where Babylon will stand. And then verse 3, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. And they use brick instead of stone and bitumen for mortar. See, they hit a problem in this plain. There's no rocks there. But they solved the problem, and they invent a whole new technology that the world's not seen before. They won't let a lack of stone get in the way of their grand plans, but it's verse 4 that shows the real purpose. Then they said, let's build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we'll be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Now, on the surface, isn't that a wonderful decision? The enterprise is completely immersed in spirituality, isn't it? I mean, they're united, they're building something with a spiritual purpose. They brought their spirituality into the marketplace. I mean, they're being all they can be, living the dream, building their self-esteem, building a name for themselves, fulfilling their attention and their potential. Thank you very much. And it's impossible, I think, not to be touched by the dream of unity. I mean, I looked up Martin Luther King's speech the other day. These are some of the words. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. That one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Oh, you'd need a heart of stone not to be moved by that. 250 years later, after the formation of the United States, I wonder whether they've got there. It's not just them though, is it? It's us too. I mean, we dream of conquering disease and ridding ourselves of poverty, of making a better world for our children. Now, even the rival sects of Islam dream of one world worshipping their way, of course. And how will we bring it about, all these dreams? Well, political unity, underwritten, of course, by violent means. You do know that violence is the last resort of the state, don't you? I mean, that's why we have some people in our community who are authorised to use violent means. That's what the police force is authorised to do. Political unity, technological advance. Because we think that if only we could walk together, we'd get over our problems. This call to unity is so powerful. But then we've got the question, why was Dr. King killed on a motel balcony with a hail of bullets? I mean, why does our technological skill so far outstrip our moral ability? And why does every political promise of a new world order seem to end up as a tyranny? God's response at Babel matters, I think, because I think we're shown three fundamental signs of rebellion that mark every human culture and every human heart. There are three there in Genesis 11. They want to build a tower to the heavens. They want to make a name for themselves. They want not to be scattered. And what these three things look like are pride, and the tool for that is their common language. I mean, they're giving meaning to the world apart from God. They think they are the ones who make significance. And the second is making a name for themselves. It's the sin of unbelief. The tool's their technology. They're making significance apart from God. The third is refusing to scatter. It's flat out disobedience. I mean, God had commanded them to fill the earth. The political tool, the political unity is one of the tools. Building security apart from God, building significance apart from God. We're just going to take each of these three attitudes in turn. And the first purpose, I think, in the tower is that it reaches up high into the heavens. Now think the tower, the world's tallest tower in Dubai still, is that right? They haven't built another taller one? There's one coming, I understand. It's an audacious, spectacularly arrogant thing, because heaven is the place of God, and they're trying to make their own means to get there. It's a stairway to the place where God lives. God had made humans a beautiful garden home. They'd rebelled and been evicted from it. And if you've been with us over the last 8 chapters since that happened, you've seen the pattern again and again. Humanity rejects God and says, we want to play God. And now they want to build a way into the heavens so they can be God. Not to just keep God out of their home, but to break into his. It's Project Occupy Heaven, right? We will be gods. Now, I want you to think about AI for a moment. See, the thought leaders of AI, that world, they have a story of what humanity could be, a story of redemption. They've got a view of humans, and it, I guess, starts with us having limited brains. We think too slowly. We don't remember everything. We don't reason clearly, right? Now, if you do hear me describing yourself, that's okay. You don't have to put your hand up. That's fine. But there's also illness and decline and death, and not necessarily in that order. Humans on this telling are defective. And they've got a way of redemption in this AI world. These large language models of reality. Join AI to our biology, they say, and we'll be able to reach beyond the end of the limits of the body. A bloke called Ray Kurzweil has been predicting for decades what he calls longevity escape velocity, a point where medicine adds more than a year to your life so that you actually start going backwards in time. Unlikely? Perhaps. But notice what it is. It's a redemption story. It's how to deal with what's in the way of us being what we ought to be. And it's executing that so that we get to a point where things are fixed. And in doing that, these people at the forefront of the AI movement are doing exactly what the builders of Babel were doing and what Adam and Eve did before them. They don't like the boundaries that God has made, and so they try to cross it. They try to replace God with themselves. And how do the people of Babel do it? Well, they say, come, let's build this tower with its top in the heavens. It's a simple and exciting message. But notice they're using language to deceive themselves and each other into thinking they can do more than they can. Language is being used to defy God. It's the words that bind them and give strength and unity to their defiance. Because it's through language that we give meaning to the world, isn't it? Hear that saying, picture paints 1,000 words? You know, the problem with that saying is which 1,000 words does it paint, right? Because words give precision. Words give meaning. And whoever coined that saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, they live in a different universe to me, because of course words hurt. Of course words are powerful. And what these people in Babel do with words, with shared words, is try to make meaning apart from the meaning that God has given. That's what our language does whenever we seek meaning without Him. And it's kind of the first thing that's going on here. But the second thing that's going on is that the builders say, let's make a name for ourselves. And the way they do it is their brilliant technology. God, we're not content with the name that you've given us. You know, we're so enthralled with our own brilliance, we must make a new name to broadcast our magnificence to the world. And this, I think, is like the temptation of technology. This is possibly not what you expected when you came to church this morning, but I am going to ask you to use your brains, like to switch them on, and you're going to need to talk with the people around you as well. So if you're sitting by yourself, you might need to get ready to move, but hang in here with me, right? You know the difference between means and ends, don't you? Right? When you want to buy a house, when you want to have a house, an end, right, you go and get a loan from the bank. You don't go and get a loan because you love paying thousands of dollars in interest, do you? Right? It's a means to the end of having a house, housing security, if you can afford it, right? And the Bible tells us to make sure we know the difference between means and ends, the way we get things and what we're actually aiming at. For the tower builders, building the tower was a means to an end, right? Well, what was the end? It was to be significant, to make a name for themselves, to demonstrate once and for all that they're equal to God, if not better. They use something inside themselves, something they've been made with, their insight and even their struggle with the lack of stones, to make themselves matter. Means to an end. Now I want you to listen to a short passage from the New Testament. You might even want to turn it up. It's from John chapter 12. And it's where Jesus is with his friends in Bethany, and a dinner is given in his honour. And it's a story where Mary takes a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume worth a year's wages, and she pours it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance. I'm afraid I don't have, a sermon aid this morning, because some people are very susceptible to certain perfumes. And so, if you do like wearing really strong perfume, thank you for not wearing that to church, because it makes it easier for some people. But you know the story. But Judas Iscariot objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You'll always have the poor among you, but you'll not always have me. So I would like you to talk with your neighbour about this for a moment. Setting aside Judas' intent to steal for a moment, right? I mean, wasn't he right? Wasn't Mary's action a failure to care for the poor? Right? She had means, the perfume, and she had a range of ends in front of her. What was Judas' means? What was his ends? What was Mary's means? What was her ends? Right? What was she aiming at? Talk to each other. I'll give you a couple of minutes. Why does Jesus affirm Mary, commend her, but condemn Judas? Well, how'd you go? Means and ends. What was Judas' means to kind of looking after the poor? He didn't really care about the poor. But if he did, well, what was his means to look after the poor? Money, and in particular, selling that perfume is worth a year's wages. Yep. You're quite right, Lyle. His ends was actually lining his own pocket. Right. So being in charge, it tells you who wants to be in charge. Always watch out for their motives. What about Mary? What was her means to doing something?
The fact is that Jesus looks on the heart, so he's looking at the heart of Mary and the heart of Judas.
They're very different things, aren't they? The hearts. But thinking about means and ends for a moment, what was the means that Mary had to do what she wanted to do? Perfume? Right, it's a pretty wealthy household, I think, as well. Some people suggest this is a kind of a provision against famine, like gold in a way, that if a famine comes, they can sell it, and it's basically keep them alive. What is her end? I mean, the perfume's not the only thing, really, is it? I mean, she lets her hair down. She, in a sense, demeans herself by wiping somebody's feet with her hair. Her own pride is part of her means. What's her end? What's she trying to do? Honouring Jesus. Glorifying Jesus. Interesting, isn't it? Judas' end is feathering his own nest. His means to do that, selling the jar. Mary's end is honouring Jesus, perhaps even more than she knew, for his love in going to the cross, and her means was anointing him with the perfume. Now back to Genesis for a minute. Technology is never neutral. It's always a means to an end. Inventing and using technology is always a deeply spiritual exercise. It's part of God's gift in making us the way we are, able to overcome problems in the world, which is what's going on here as they make, bricks and use mortar. Right? It's doing exactly what he asked humans to do, exercise dominion over the world. The problem comes when we replace trusting the true end of all things, trusting God, who's made us for himself, to know him and enjoy him forever, when we swap that out for trusting the means he's given us to overcome problems in the world. See, when our use of technology is driven by unbelief that God is not God, that we can replace God, then technology swells in spiritual significance until we find our significance in it, in what we can do, and decide we don't need God. We will make a name apart from him. We will have an end apart from him being God. And I think this is so timely, this passage, because I don't know a generation in the world that's been more infatuated with its own technology than ours. I mean, it's not just how much we use it or how dependent we are on it. I think there's been a spiritual shift. We're so besotted by this idea of advance. I mean, if it's new, the latest release, it's just got to be better, right? Our gadgets carry a promise. Use these, you'll work less and have more time for family and friends. Shorter weeks at work, more efficiency. And how's that turned out? We're enslaved, aren't we? We've got to have a law to enshrine the right to disconnect. Well, the third issue going on in this passage is just plain disobedience. The people didn't want to be scattered. There's safety in numbers. They wanted security as a body politic apart from God. And you know, these three things that are going on here, usually they can't be separated. You can't pull pride apart from unbelief, apart from disobedience. An act of pride has always got unbelief tangled up in it. It's always disobedient to take pride in yourself rather than as God, the ultimate giver. So Babel, I think, is very practical this morning. Deeply practical. The promise of our language and technology, our unity, it's so powerful because there's a half-truth in it. We are made by God to rule the world, not in defiance of him, but in love. With him, showing him to the world. And part of bearing his image is inventing clever technology and naming things through the world. And language. And the use of the power that he's built into creation. But whenever we take God's gifts and use them to make our own meaning, our own significance, our own security, we always end up with the opposite. Anxiety and futility and slavery and emptiness and maybe even boredom. Well, now the second half of the passage. These are the plans of our gracious God. And there's a lovely irony in verse 5. The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built. I hope you see the irony. The highest pinnacle of human achievement. It's so puny that God can't even see it from heaven. What's that thing they're doing? It's wonderful. Verses 7 and 8, come, let's go down and confuse their language so they won't understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is an act of judgment, isn't it? An act of grace as well. And we're going to look at these two things. See, with one word, God divides their languages. The very thing they feared actually happens to them. They're scattered. They've carefully built unity. Their brilliant invention that they've gathered around, it fails. And from now on, humanity will never globally unite to pull off the coup of running the world without God. And the story ends on one more irony, verse 9. That's why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. And just basically in Hebrew, Babel means confusion, or it evokes the word confusion. And in the languages of that time, Babel meant gate of the gods, and God says no, it's actually confusion. Every time we flaunt our arrogance and unbelief and disobedience, every time we try to build a stairway to heaven, it ends in confusion. But we can't understand this passage unless we see in it also a double grace. There's judgment, but there's actually two really good things as well. And let me show you that with two New Testament passages. So the first is in Acts 17, and you might want to turn that up. Paul's preaching there in Europe, right? He's come over to Greece, and he's in Athens by this stage at the marketplace, the Areopagus. And in verse 26, he says about God, from one man God made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they'd seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he's not far from any of us. See, what Paul understands is that the national boundaries, the ethnicities that God has built into the world through language and culture, were God's doing in the first place. Dividing people was God's doing. How does that work as a blessing? Well, it's the blessing of frustration. See, the divisions and frustrations in our world are a real problem, but they are principally a frustration to our pride, to our false unity, to our pretensions to play God. They're an antidote to our constant attempt to wreck the world. God keeps reminding us through these things that true unity cannot be found in our enterprise. It's only in him. He is our only true end. He will give us a name and open the gate of glory to us. And our frustrations tell us that even our finest technological triumphs are foolishness compared to the things of God. So Babel tells us that we'll always live in a divided world, and yet as Christians, actually we ought to work for unity, using all the skill and technology and political process we can, knowing that true unity only comes from God himself. That's the first double grace. And the second one is from another passage in the New Testament, and it mirrors the day that God came down to Babel and confused the languages. It's the day that God came down again, this time in the person of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, to unite languages. In Acts chapter 2, verse 6, there's people assembled in Jerusalem, and they hear a sound like the rushing of a great wind. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one heard their own language being spoken. So the whole world is gathered, and when you look at the list of the nations where the people came from, it's very similar actually to Genesis chapter 10, the table of nations there. But by this point, Christ has died and has been raised and returned to the Father, and he's said to his followers, go to Jerusalem and wait for what's happening next. Wait for power from the Spirit. And when the Spirit of Christ comes, he gives back what Babel tries to seize for itself. Genuine understanding, genuine community, genuine unity around the gospel of the crucified and risen Messiah. No matter your heart language, no matter your skin colour, the Holy Spirit breaks these barriers through language, because Christ has broken the one true barrier between us and God. So let me conclude. The dream of Babel is a half-good dream. It'll never come about by our cleverness or our technology or our attempts at political unity. It will never come except through God's means, because it comes from him alone. That's one reason language matters so much to us as Christians. The church begins in Acts as a new language community, a new language where real communication is possible, because we're united in Jesus. Because our new language is that of speaking the truth in love, of loving one another. In our speaking and singing and praying, we try to do the opposite of what the world is doing, making a name for itself, making ourselves God, which always ends in manipulation, deception, coercion, oppression. There's the double grace of Babel. On the one hand, God protects us from ourselves and from the effects of our own sin. And on the other, he gives us his Spirit. He lives in us. He gives us a new name, forms in us a unity. It's the ministry of the Spirit that together we call on one Father. You know, the basic work of the Spirit is to be able to call God Dad, Abba, Father, rather than fear him as judge. The Spirit gives us that language. And see how he answers Babel point for point. The Spirit gives us meaning, because Christ has died for you. How much do you matter? Well, here's the heavenly logic. God would rather his Son die than you miss out. That's how much you matter. And the significance of Christ, the security that comes from him. I mean, the very meaning and significance of security that Babel grasped at and never found. Because in the gospel, the Spirit makes clear that God has given us himself. And you know, Jesus says, if you don't have his Spirit, all you need to do is ask him, and he'll give it to you. We're going to sing. After we sing, we're going to have a question and comment time. And I don't know about you, but I still have lots of questions about Genesis, and especially this passage. Thanks, Corinna. Hi, I'm Tim Mildenhall. I'm the Senior Minister here at St John's Asquith. We're a group of ordinary people who've come to know the extraordinary love of Jesus. And so what that means is we think everybody matters. I'm not sure what's brought you online today, but I'm glad you're here. Please feel free to get in touch with us. We've got a bunch of services. We'd love to see you in person. Welcome.